The spring breeze carried a hint of warmth as Daniel Carter and his daughter Emily made their way home from Morton's grocery. Paper bags rustled in their arms, filled with ingredients for the night's dinner. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the suburban sidewalk, and cherry blossoms dotted the trees that lined their path. "So I was thinking maybe we could try that new pasta recipe," Emily said, shifting her grocery bag to her other arm. "You know, the one Mrs. Peterson shared at church last Sunday?" Daniel smiled at his daughter. "The one with the sun-dried tomatoes?" "Sure, why not?" He enjoyed these quiet moments with Emily, even if they were just running errands. Since losing his wife Sarah 5 years ago, their little routines had become precious anchors in their lives. "Dad, you're not just saying yes because you don't want to cook, right?" Emily teased, her ponytail swinging as she walked. "Me? Never." Daniel chuckled. But his laughter died in his throat as a cry pierced the peaceful afternoon. "Help! Someone! Please, help me." The voice was filled with pain and desperation. Daniel and Emily froze, then turned toward the sound. About 50 feet ahead, a young woman was doubled over on the sidewalk, one hand braced against a tree trunk, the other clutching her very pregnant belly. "Oh my God," Emily whispered, her eyes wide. Daniel's grocery bag hit the ground with a thud, cans rolling across the concrete. "Emily, stay here with the groceries," he called over his shoulder, already running toward the woman. The young woman's face was contorted in pain, tears streaming down her cheeks. She wore a simple cotton dress and looked to be in her mid-20s, with long dark hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. "I'm here to help," Daniel said, keeping his voice calm despite his racing heart. "I'm Daniel Carter." "What's your name?" "Maria," she gasped between breaths. "The baby. It's coming." "I can't." Daniel helped ease her to a sitting position against the tree. "Okay, Maria, just try to breathe." "Emily," he called out. "Call 911. Emily had already pulled out her phone, but her hands were shaking so much she nearly dropped it. After a moment's hesitation, she switched to the camera function instead, her instincts telling her to document what was happening. As Maria's cries grew more intense, memories flooded Daniel's mind, conversations with Sarah over late-night tea, her animated hands gesturing as she described her day at the hospital. "Sometimes babies come so fast," she'd said, "and you have to be ready for anything." "Maria, I need you to listen to me," Daniel said firmly, kneeling beside her. "My wife was a labor and delivery nurse. I'm not a medical professional, but I know the basics. Will you let me help you?" Maria nodded frantically, gripping his hand with surprising strength. "Please. Help my baby." Daniel took off his jacket and laid it on the ground. With gentle but firm movements, he helped Maria lie back, trying to make her as comfortable as possible on the hard concrete. Emily stood a few feet away, her phone steady now as she filmed, her face a mixture of horror and amazement. "Deep breaths, Maria," Daniel coached, his voice steadier than he felt. "In through your nose, out through your mouth." He could see the baby was coming fast, too fast for paramedics to arrive in time. "I can see the head," he announced, fighting to keep his voice calm. "On your next contraction, I need you to push." Maria screamed as she pushed, her fingers digging into the grass beside the sidewalk. Daniel's hands were steady as he supported the baby's head, Sarah's voice echoing in his mind. "Guide the shoulders gently, that's the trickiest part." "You're doing great," he encouraged Maria. "One more big push." The next few moments were a blur of motion and sound. Maria's final push, a tiny body sliding into Daniel's waiting hands, and then, gloriously, a high-pitched cry splitting the air. "It's a girl," Daniel announced, his voice thick with emotion. He quickly checked the baby's airways and color, remembering Sarah's lessons. The newborn's angry cries were strong and healthy, her tiny fists waving in the spring air. Using his clean handkerchief, Daniel gently wiped the baby's face and wrapped her in his button-down shirt, which he'd stripped off, leaving him in his undershirt. He placed the bundle on Maria's chest, where she immediately clutched her daughter close, sobbing with joy. "She's beautiful," Maria whispered, touching her baby's cheek with trembling fingers. "Thank you. Thank you so much." In the distance, sirens wailed, growing louder by the second. Emily had lowered her phone, tears streaming down her face as she watched her father tend to mother and child with such gentle confidence. The paramedics arrived in a flurry of activity, their equipment clattering on the sidewalk. As they took over, checking vitals and preparing Maria and the baby for transport, Daniel stepped back, his hands shaking as the adrenaline began to wear off. Emily moved to stand beside him, slipping her small hand into his larger one. "Dad," she whispered, her voice filled with wonder and a new kind of respect. "I had no idea you could do that." Daniel squeezed her hand, watching as the paramedics carefully lifted Maria and her baby onto a stretcher. His clothes were a mess, his knees scraped from the concrete, but in that moment, he felt more alive than he had in years. In his mind, he could almost see Sarah smiling, proud that he'd remembered her lessons, proud that he'd helped bring a new life into the world on this ordinary spring afternoon. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows as Daniel stirred his coffee, watching Emily pick at her bowl of cereal. She hadn't looked up from her phone since sitting down, her thumbs scrolling frantically. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" Daniel asked, taking a sip from his mug. Emily's sharp gasp made him nearly spill his coffee. "Oh my gosh, Dad! The video! It's everywhere!" Her eyes were wide as she stared at her screen. "I posted it last night before bed, and now it has over 50,000 shares." Daniel set down his coffee. "What video?" "From yesterday, when you helped that lady have her baby." Emily turned her phone around, showing him the footage. There he was, kneeling on the sidewalk, his voice steady as he helped bring a new life into the world. The comment section overflowed with praise and admiration. "I can't believe this," Daniel muttered, adjusting his glasses to read some of the responses. "Real-life hero," one comment declared. "What an amazing father," said another. His cheeks grew warm. The doorbell rang, making them both jump. Through the front window, Daniel spotted a news van parked across the street, a reporter in a blue blazer standing on their porch with a cameraman behind her. "Oh no," he groaned. But Emily was already bouncing with excitement. "Dad, we have to answer it. This is so cool." "Emily, I don't think," but she was already heading for the door. Daniel hurried after her, running a self-conscious hand through his hair. When Emily opened the door, the reporter's professional smile brightened. "Mr. Carter? I'm Sarah Chen from Channel 7 News. We'd love to talk to you about your heroic actions yesterday." Before Daniel could decline, 3 more news vans pulled up to their quiet suburban street. His phone started buzzing with notifications, messages from coworkers, old friends, distant relatives who'd seen the video. It wasn't heroic," Daniel stammered. "Anyone would have done the same. But they didn't," Sarah pressed. "You did." "Could we get a quick interview?" Emily tugged at his sleeve, her eyes pleading. Daniel saw something in her expression he hadn't noticed in years. Pride, not the obligatory kind that came with father-daughter relationships, but genuine admiration. "Okay," he conceded. Just a short one. The morning dissolved into a blur of interviews and congratulations. Daniel found himself retelling the story again and again, each time remembering more details. The way his late wife Lisa's voice had seemed to guide him through it, memories of her explaining emergency delivery procedures during her nursing career floating to the surface of his mind. When he finally managed to leave for work, neighbors he'd barely spoken to in years stopped him on the street. Mrs. Henderson from 3 doors down hugged him tearfully. "Such a wonderful thing you did," she said. "Lisa would be so proud." That comment stuck with him all day. Would Lisa be proud? For the first time since her passing 5 years ago, Daniel felt like maybe he'd done something worthy of her memory. At the office, his normally quiet cubicle became a hub of activity. Coworkers dropped by with coffee, congratulations, and questions. His boss even called him in to shake his hand. "Never knew we had a hero in accounting," Mr. Peterson said with a grin. The attention was overwhelming. Daniel had spent so long trying to be invisible, to keep his head down and just get through each day. Now, everyone wanted to talk to him, to hear his story, to connect. It was exhausting, but there was something else too. A warm spark in his chest he hadn't felt in years. That evening, after declining 3 more interview requests, Daniel finally settled into his armchair with a cup of chamomile tea. Emily sat cross-legged on the couch nearby, still monitoring the video's growing view count. "Dad?" she said softly. Yesterday, when you were helping that lady, you looked different. Like strong. Like you knew exactly what to do." She paused, fiddling with her phone case. It reminded me of how Mom used to be with her patients. Daniel's throat tightened. "Your mother was the real hero. I just remembered some things she taught me." "Well, I think you're both heroes." Emily's smile was genuine, touching something deep in Daniel's heart. Their relationship had been strained since Lisa's death. Both of them lost in their own grief, unable to bridge the gap. But now, something was shifting. His phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Daniel almost ignored it, but something made him answer. "Hello, Mr. Daniel?" The voice was soft, uncertain. "This is Maria." "From yesterday?" "Maria, are you all right? How's the baby?" There was a tremor in her voice when she replied. "The baby is good. She's perfect, but—" She paused, and Daniel could hear the fear in her silence. "I need your help, please." Daniel sat up straighter, the warm glow of the day's events fading as he heard the desperation in her tone. The tea sat forgotten on the side table, steam rising into the quiet evening air. The fluorescent lights of the hospital corridor cast harsh shadows as Daniel and Emily made their way through the quiet maternity ward. Their footsteps echoed softly against the polished floors, matching the steady beeping of distant monitors. It was well past visiting hours, but the nurse at the desk had recognized Daniel from the viral video and waved them through with a knowing smile. Emily clutched her father's arm. "Dad, what do you think she needs?" Daniel shook his head, his mouth set in a worried line. "I don't know, sweetheart. Let's just hear her out." They found room 214 exactly where the nurse had directed them. Daniel knocked gently on the door frame, and a soft voice called them in. The small room was dimly lit by a single bedside lamp, casting a warm glow over Maria as she cradled her newborn son. Dark circles rimmed her eyes, and despite the peaceful scene, tension lined her face. "You came," Maria whispered, relief flooding her features. "I wasn't sure you would." "Of course we came," Emily said, moving closer to peek at the sleeping baby. "He's beautiful. What's his name?" Maria's eyes welled with tears. "Lucas." She stroked the baby's cheek with one finger. "It means light." Her voice cracked on the last word. Daniel pulled up 2 chairs, and they sat beside the bed. "What's wrong, Maria? Are you and the baby okay?" Maria's hands trembled as she adjusted Lucas's blanket. "The baby is perfect, healthy." She took a shaky breath. "But I'm in trouble. Big trouble." Emily leaned forward. "What kind of trouble?" Maria's eyes darted to the door before she continued in a hushed voice. "I saw the video online." "Your video?" She glanced at Emily. "It's everywhere now. And if he sees it—" She pressed her lips together, fighting back tears. "Who?" Daniel asked, though something in his gut told him he already knew the answer. "My ex, Lucas's father." Maria's voice dropped even lower. "I ran away from him 3 months ago." She touched her cheek unconsciously, as if remembering an old pain. "He hurt me. Many times. I couldn't let him hurt the baby too." Emily's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh no. I'm so sorry. I never thought. I'll take the video down right now." She fumbled for her phone. "It won't matter now," Maria said. "People have shared it thousands of times. And She swallowed hard. "I'm undocumented. If he finds me, I have nowhere to go. No family here, no friends. The shelter I was staying at isn't safe anymore. Too many people know about the video." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. He thought about his quiet life with Emily, the careful routine they'd built since losing Sarah. Taking in Maria and her baby would change everything. The media attention was already more than he wanted to handle. Getting involved in her situation could bring legal troubles, maybe even danger. "Please," Maria whispered, clutching Lucas closer. "I wouldn't ask, but I'm desperate. Just for a few days, until I can figure something out. I can't go back to him. Her voice broke. and Lucas stirred in his sleep. Daniel looked at his daughter, seeking guidance in her young face. To his surprise, Emily's expression was fierce with determination. "We can't just leave her, Dad," Emily said firmly. "Remember what Mom always said? When someone needs help, you help." That's what she believed in. The mention of Sarah hit Daniel like a physical blow. He could picture his wife's face so clearly. The way she'd light up when she talked about helping her patients. The gentle way she'd treated everyone who came through her emergency room doors. Maria watched their exchange with desperate hope in her eyes. Lucas made a small sound in his sleep, and she soothed him automatically. Her touch so gentle it made Daniel's chest ache. "Okay," Daniel said finally, the word coming out before he'd fully processed the decision. "Okay. You can stay with us. Just until you get back on your feet." The relief that flooded Maria's face made her look years younger. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you both so much." They spent the next hour making arrangements. The hospital was discharging Maria the next morning, so Daniel and Emily helped her pack the few belongings she had, mostly baby supplies provided by the hospital. Emily made lists of things they'd need to buy, her practical nature taking over once the decision was made. It was nearly midnight when they finally headed home. The spring air had turned chilly, and Emily huddled in her jacket as they walked to the car. "Are you sure about this, Dad?" she asked quietly, though her tone suggested she already knew his answer. Daniel thought about Maria's frightened eyes, about baby Lucas sleeping peacefully, unaware of the chaos around him. "No," he admitted. "But your mom would have done the same thing." Emily smiled and squeezed his hand. "Yeah, she would have." They drove home in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts. But as they turned onto their street, Daniel's heart sank. A news van was still parked in front of their house, its satellite dish gleaming in the streetlights. A cameraman dozed in the front seat, but the camera itself was pointed straight at their front door. Daniel gripped the steering wheel tighter. Tomorrow, they would bring Maria and Lucas home, right past those cameras. The thought made his stomach churn. What had seemed like a simple act of kindness was about to become much more complicated. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, casting a warm glow on the unfamiliar scene unfolding in Daniel's usually quiet home. The sizzle of eggs on the stovetop mingled with the soft whimpers coming from a borrowed bassinet in the corner. Maria stood at the stove, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, determinedly flipping pancakes despite her obvious exhaustion. "You really don't have to cook," Emily said, hovering uncertainly nearby. "You should be resting." Maria shook her head, managing a tired smile. "Cooking helps me feel normal. Like I'm contributing something." The baby's whimpers grew louder, and Maria's shoulders tensed. "I can check on him," Emily offered, then quickly corrected herself. "I mean, if that's okay?" Maria nodded gratefully, and Emily moved to the bassinet. She peered down at the tiny bundle wrapped in one of her old baby blankets that Daniel had found in the attic last night. The baby's face was scrunched up, ready to unleash a full cry. "Hey there, little guy," Emily whispered, gently rocking the bassinet. "It's okay." Daniel watched from the doorway, his coffee growing cold in his hands. The scene before him was both heartwarming and terrifying. This instant family that had appeared overnight, bringing both comfort and complications to their carefully ordered lives. "I made enough for everyone," Maria said, noticing him. Her eyes were anxious, seeking approval. "Thank you," Daniel managed, forcing a smile. "But I should head to work." The drive to the office felt longer than usual. Daniel's mind kept wandering back to Maria and the baby, to Emily's unexpected gentleness with them both. When he finally reached his desk at the accounting firm, his colleague Steve immediately appeared. "Hey, hero," Steve said, but his usual joking tone was subdued. "Boss wants to see you." Right away, Daniel's stomach dropped. He'd known this conversation was coming. Mr. Peterson, his supervisor of 15 years, was waiting behind his massive oak desk, reading glasses perched on his nose as he studied something on his computer screen. "Sit down, Daniel," Mr. Peterson said, gesturing to the chair across from him. He turned his monitor around, showing a local news website. The headline read, "Local Hero Shelter's Undocumented Mother." "The board is concerned, Mr. Peterson said, removing his glasses. We have certain clients who might not appreciate our senior accountant being involved in controversial matters. She's just a mother protecting her baby, Daniel said quietly. She's also here illegally, and you're harboring her. Mr. Peterson leaned forward. Look, Daniel. You've been with us for years. You're valuable to this firm. But this situation, it could damage our reputation. Are you asking me to throw her out? I'm suggesting you think carefully about your choices. Mr. Peterson's tone was gentle but firm. We've all admired how you've raised Emily since Sarah passed. Don't jeopardize that stability now. The rest of the workday passed in a blur. During his lunch break, Daniel walked to the corner deli, only to overhear two women discussing him in line. Did you hear about Daniel Carter taking in that illegal immigrant? Well, I think it's wonderful. That poor girl needed help. But what kind of example is he setting for his daughter? And who knows what kind of trouble he's bringing to the neighborhood? Daniel bought his sandwich and ate at his desk. When he arrived home that evening, the house was oddly quiet. He found Emily and Maria in the living room, Maria nursing the baby while Emily sat close by, speaking in soft tones. He's so tiny, Emily was saying. What's it like, being a mom? Maria smiled, adjusting the baby in her arms. Scary. Beautiful. Sometimes both at once. She looked up at Daniel in the doorway. Your daughter has been amazing today. She helped me figure out how to use your washing machine, and she's a natural with Miguel. Miguel? Daniel asked. I named him after my grandfather, Maria explained, then quickly added, I hope that's okay. Of course it's okay, Emily said firmly, then turned to her father. Dad, come see. He has the sweetest little smile when he's sleeping. Daniel moved closer, watching as the baby dozed contentedly in Maria's arms. Emily leaned her head against Maria's shoulder, completely at ease. The sight made his throat tight. He hadn't seen his daughter this relaxed, this openly affectionate, since before Sarah died. Later that night, after Emily had gone to bed and Maria had finally succumbed to exhaustion, Daniel stood at his living room window. The street outside was mostly dark, except for the occasional flash of cameras from the news vans that still lingered. Someone had tipped them off that Maria was staying here. He pressed his forehead against the cool glass, closing his eyes. Sarah, he whispered, what should I do? The memory of his wife's compassionate heart tugged at him. She had always been the one to take in strays, to help neighbors in need, to put others first. A car door slammed outside, and another camera flashed. Daniel watched the reporters huddled in their vans, waiting for a story. From upstairs came the faint sound of Miguel's crying, followed by the gentle murmur of Maria's voice singing a Spanish lullaby. The sound drifted down like a tender reminder of what was at stake. Daniel clasped his hands together, a gesture he hadn't made in years. Lord, he whispered, I could use some guidance here. The words felt rusty in his mouth. Prayers had been Sarah's territory, not his. But tonight, watching the cameras flash outside while a young mother and her baby slept under his roof, he found himself reaching for something bigger than himself. The lullaby upstairs faded into silence, and for a moment, the house was perfectly still. Through the window, Daniel could see his reflection, tired, worried, but somehow more alive than he'd felt in years. Daniel adjusted his tie for the 5th time in front of the hallway mirror. The navy suit felt stiff and uncomfortable. He hadn't worn it since Sarah's funeral 3 years ago. His fingers trembled slightly as he smoothed down the lapels. Dad, you look fine, Emily said, appearing behind him. She wore a pretty blue dress and had styled her hair in loose waves. Stop fidgeting. Maybe I should just call and cancel, Daniel muttered. I'm not good at public speaking. You can't cancel. Everyone's expecting you. Emily straightened his tie with confident hands. Besides, you're a hero now. Daniel winced at the word. I just did what anyone would do. From the living room, Maria appeared holding her baby boy, whom she'd named Lucas. Emily's right, mister. Daniel. The community needs to hear your voice. Her gentle smile carried warmth and encouragement. We'll be fine here. Go inspire them. The drive to the community center felt longer than usual. Emily chatted excitedly beside him while he gripped the steering wheel. His prepared speech cards crumpled in his pocket. The parking lot was packed. It seemed the whole town had turned out for the local heroes' recognition night. Inside, the gymnasium had been transformed with white tablecloths, flower arrangements, and twinkling lights. People smiled and waved as Daniel and Emily found their seats near the front. His boss was there, along with what seemed like half his co-workers. Several of his neighbors had come too, including Mrs. Henderson, who'd been bringing over casseroles all week. The mayor spoke first, followed by a local firefighter who'd rescued a family from a house fire. Daniel barely heard their words over the pounding of his heart. Then suddenly, the MC was calling his name. And now, please welcome Daniel Carter, whose quick thinking and compassion brought new life into our community. Emily squeezed his hand. You've got this, Dad. Daniel walked to the podium on shaky legs. The bright lights made it hard to see the audience clearly, which was probably a blessing. He pulled out his note cards, then looked at all the expectant faces, and slowly put them back in his pocket. These people didn't need rehearsed words. 3 years ago, he began, his voice quiet but steady, I lost my wife, Sarah. She was a nurse, the kind of person who always knew exactly what to do in a crisis. When I found Maria on that sidewalk, I was terrified. But somehow, Sarah's voice was there in my head, guiding my hands. The room was completely silent now. Daniel took a deep breath and continued. People keep calling me a hero, but I'm not. I'm just someone who couldn't walk away when another person needed help. And that's really what this is all about, not looking away when things get difficult. Sometimes the right thing isn't the easy thing. Sometimes it means stepping out of our comfort zone, taking risks, opening our hearts when they've been closed for too long. His eyes found Emily in the crowd. She was wiping tears from her cheeks, but smiling. My daughter filmed that video, and yes, it went viral. But the real story isn't about one man helping deliver a baby. It's about what happens after the cameras stop rolling. It's about a community choosing between fear and love, between turning away and reaching out. Daniel's voice grew stronger as he spoke from his heart. We all face moments where we have to choose who we want to be. Do we help the stranger on the sidewalk? Do we welcome those in need? Do we let our fears rule us, or do we choose compassion? My wife taught me that every life has value, that every person deserves dignity and safety. When I look at my daughter, I want her to grow up in a world where people still believe that, where we don't just talk about being good neighbors, we actually are good neighbors. The words flowed naturally now, powered by conviction. This isn't about being a hero, it's about being human. It's about remembering that we're all connected, all worthy of second chances, all capable of making a difference in someone else's story. As Daniel finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. People rose to their feet, and Emily rushed forward to hug him tight. His boss clapped him on the shoulder with newfound respect, and Mrs. Henderson dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of handshakes and congratulations. Several people pressed business cards into his hand, mentioning legal aid services and immigrant advocacy groups. The mayor promised to look into resources for Maria. Even some of the previous skeptics seemed moved by his words. By the time Daniel and Emily headed home, his spirit felt lighter than it had in years. Emily hadn't stopped smiling, occasionally glancing at her phone to show him how clips of his speech were already spreading online with positive comments. "Dad," she said softly as they pulled into their driveway, "Mom would be really proud of you." Daniel's throat tightened with emotion. "Thank you, sweetheart." But the warm glow of the evening shattered as soon as they stepped inside. Maria sat hunched on the living room couch, her face streaked with tears. Baby Lucas slept peacefully in his portable bassinet, unaware of his mother's distress. "Maria, what's wrong?" Daniel hurried to her side while Emily hovered anxiously in the doorway. Maria's hands shook as she held up her phone, showing a message from an unknown number. Through her tears, she managed to whisper, "He found me." Carlos saw the video. "He's coming for us." The morning sun barely peeked through the kitchen curtains as Daniel stood at the counter, his coffee growing cold. Maria sat at the table, her shoulders hunched, while Emily paced the kitchen floor, holding Maria's sleeping baby against her chest. "I have to go," Maria whispered, her voice trembling. "I won't put your family in danger. Not after everything you've done for us." Daniel set his mug down with a gentle thud. "That's not the answer, Maria. Running won't solve anything. It'll just make things harder for you and the baby." "Dad's right," Emily said, swaying softly with the infant. "You can't keep running forever. We can figure this out together. Maria's eyes welled with tears.
You don't know him.
Roberto, he won't stop. The message he sent. She couldn't finish the sentence. Daniel pulled out a chair and sat beside her. Listen, I know people who can help. Pastor Mike at the church has connections with legal aid groups. And Sarah Thompson, she's on the city council. She's always supported immigrant families. But the cost. Maria started. Let us worry about that. Emily interrupted, her voice firm despite her youth. This little guy needs stability. She looked down at the sleeping baby in her arms, his tiny fingers curled around her thumb. Throughout the morning, Daniel made calls. Pastor Mike arrived first, his kind face creased with concern as he sat with them in the living room. There are organizations that specialize in cases like yours, Maria. They can help with both your immigration status and getting protection from Roberto. Sarah Thompson came next, bringing contact information for immigration lawyers and domestic violence advocates. The living room filled with quiet conversation and the scratch of pens on paper as they made plans. But not everyone was supportive. Through the window, Daniel could see Mrs. Henderson from across the street speaking with another neighbor, both of them gesturing toward his house with disapproving looks. His phone buzzed with a text from a coworker. Think about what you're doing, Dan. This could blow up in your face. By afternoon, Maria had begun to relax slightly. She sat on the couch, watching Emily show the baby a colorful picture book. The infant cooed, his tiny hands reaching for the pages, and Maria's smile reached her eyes for the first time that day. Daniel found himself watching her more and more. The gentle way she touched her son's cheek, how her laugh seemed to brighten the whole room when Emily made silly faces at the baby. Something stirred in his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced since before his wife's passing. It both thrilled and terrified him. Thank you, Maria said softly, catching his eye. For not giving up on us. Daniel felt warmth spread through his chest. We're in this together now, he replied, surprising himself with how much he meant it. The afternoon brought more visitors. Members of Pastor Mike's congregation dropped off casseroles and baby supplies. Sarah Thompson returned with a domestic violence counselor who spoke with Maria privately. Even Daniel's next-door neighbor, Mr. Chen, came by with his wife, bringing homemade dumplings and firm words of support. My parents were immigrants too, Mr. Chen said, clasping Daniel's shoulder. They faced similar prejudice. But good people stood up for them. Just like you're doing now. As evening approached, the house grew quiet again. Emily had fallen asleep on the couch, the baby secure in his portable bassinet nearby. Maria sat at the kitchen table, reviewing papers from the legal aid organization, her face set in determination. Daniel made tea, placing a mug in front of her. How are you holding up? Better, she said, looking up at him. I was so scared this morning, but now. She paused, collecting her thoughts. Seeing everyone come together, seeing Emily with the baby. Their eyes met, and Daniel felt that flutter in his chest again. Maria quickly looked down at her tea, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. The moment hung between them, full of unspoken possibilities. Meanwhile, in a dim motel room 50 miles away, Roberto Martinez sat on the edge of a sagging bed. The local news played on his phone, showing Daniel's speech from the fundraiser. The words echoed in the small room. Sometimes, doing the right thing isn't the easy thing. Roberto's face twisted with anger. He hurled the phone across the room, where it clattered against the wall. I'll find you, he muttered, standing up. I'll find you both. The evening had settled into a gentle rhythm in the Carter household. The remnants of a shared lasagna dinner still lingered in the kitchen. Empty plates with traces of tomato sauce, garlic breadcrumbs scattered across the table, and the warm aroma of home cooking hanging in the air. These family dinners had become precious moments over the past weeks, a time when they could forget about the tensions outside their front door. Daniel watched as Emily helped clear the table, noticing how naturally she moved around Maria, who was cradling her baby while humming a soft Spanish lullaby. The infant's eyes were heavy with sleep. Tiny fingers curled around Maria's thumb. The scene made Daniel's heart ache with a mixture of joy and something deeper, a feeling he hadn't allowed himself to explore fully. Time for bed, Em, Daniel said, gathering the last of the dishes. You've got that biology test tomorrow. Emily groaned but didn't argue. "Good night, Maria," she said, giving the young mother a quick hug before heading upstairs. The casual affection between them warmed Daniel's chest. His daughter had come so far from her initial wariness. Daniel followed Emily up to her room, their nightly routine unchanged since she was small. Her bedroom still held traces of both childhood and emerging adolescence. Stuffed animals sharing space with makeup brushes. Old science fair ribbons pinned next to concert ticket stubs. "Dad?" Emily said as she climbed into bed. "I'm glad we helped them. Maria and the baby, I mean." Daniel sat on the edge of her bed, smoothing her comforter. "Me too, sweetheart. Though sometimes I worry." "Don't," Emily interrupted, her expression serious beyond her years. "Mom would have done the same thing. You know she would have." The mention of his late wife caught Daniel off guard, but Emily was right. Sarah had always led with her heart, especially when it came to helping others. He leaned down and kissed his daughter's forehead. "Get some sleep, okay?" Back downstairs. Daniel found Maria in the living room, still humming as she walked a gentle path with her sleeping baby. The soft yellow lamplight cast a warm glow over them both. She looked up when he entered, offering a tired smile that made his breath catch. "He's finally asleep," she whispered, carefully lowering herself onto the couch. "Your daughter, she is so good with him, like a big sister." Daniel settled into his armchair, allowing himself to relax into the peaceful moment. "She's always wanted a sibling, Sarah and I." He stopped, surprised at how easily his wife's name came to his lips tonight. The loud bang against the front door shattered everything. Maria's baby startled awake with a cry. Another bang, harder this time, rattled the door in its frame. Daniel was on his feet instantly, his heart hammering. "Maria!" a man's voice roared from outside. "I know you're in there." Maria clutched her baby closer, her face draining of color. "Roberto," she whispered, terror threading through her voice. The next impact made the door shudder. Daniel moved quickly, positioning himself between Maria and the entrance. "Get upstairs," he ordered quietly. "Go to Emily's room and lock the door. Call 911. Maria hesitated for a split second before hurrying toward the stairs, her baby wailing against her shoulder. Daniel could hear Emily's door opening above, her frightened voice calling down, "Dad, stay in your room," he shouted back, just as the front door burst open with a horrifying crack of splintering wood. Roberto filled the doorframe, a stocky man with wild eyes and clenched fists. The porch light from behind cast his face in shadow, but Daniel could see the rage contorting his features. The smell of alcohol rolled off him in waves. "Where is she?" Roberto demanded, taking a menacing step forward. Daniel held his ground, his voice steady despite his racing pulse. "You need to leave. Now." "This isn't your business," Roberto snarled, moving closer. "That's my woman. My kid. I saw that video. You playing hero, taking what's mine." Outside, porch lights were flicking on up and down the street. A neighbor's voice called out, "Everything okay over there?" Roberto ignored the question, lunging forward to grab Daniel's shirt. "Get out of my way!" Daniel knocked his hands aside, thanking God for those self-defense classes Sarah had insisted they take together years ago. "They're not yours," he said firmly. "They're not anyone's property. And you're not welcome here." Upstairs, he could hear Maria's voice, sharp with fear as she spoke to emergency services. Emily was crying. The sound of his daughter's tears sparked something fierce in Daniel's chest. "Last chance," Daniel warned, his hands raised defensively. "Leave now, before the police arrive." Roberto's response was a roar of fury as he charged forward, sending them both crashing into the coffee table. Glass shattered. Pictures fell from the walls. Daniel managed to roll, putting himself between Roberto and the stairs, but took a heavy blow to his ribs in the process. More voices were shouting outside now. Someone yelled about calling the police. Through the open door, Daniel could see neighbors gathering on the sidewalk. Phones raised. The distant wail of sirens cut through the night air, but Roberto seemed beyond reason. His face twisted into something inhuman as he launched himself at Daniel again, fists swinging wildly. Daniel braced himself for the impact, knowing he had to hold on just a little longer. For Maria, for the baby, for Emily, for this fragile family that had somehow formed in the wake of one unexpected moment of kindness. "Dad!" Emily screamed from upstairs. The sirens grew louder. Roberto's fist drew back. Daniel planted his feet, ready to take whatever came next. Red and blue lights flashed across the darkened street, casting eerie shadows on the gathering crowd of neighbors. 2 police officers wrestled with Maria's ex-husband, forcing his hands behind his back as he thrashed and shouted threats in both English and Spanish. The sharp click of handcuffs finally silenced his rage. Maria stood on the front lawn, her baby pressed tightly against her chest, tears streaming down her face. Her whole body trembled, but her arms remained steady around her child, protecting him from the chaos. "It's over, mi amor," she whispered to the infant, who had somehow remained asleep through the entire ordeal. "It's finally over." Daniel leaned against the porch railing, wincing as he touched the spot where a punch had landed on his jaw. Emily gripped his other hand so tightly her knuckles were white. She hadn't said a word since the police arrived, but her eyes blazed with a mixture of fear and fierce pride as she watched her father. Mrs. Peterson from next door pushed through the crowd, clutching her robe closed. "Daniel Carter, are you all right? Do you need an ambulance?" "I'm fine," Daniel managed, though his voice was rough. "Just some bruises." More neighbors approached, offering support and concern. Mr. Thompson, who had always been cold toward Maria, now stood guard at the bottom of the porch steps, as if daring anyone else to try causing trouble. Miss Rivera from across the street wrapped a blanket around Maria's shoulders, speaking soft words of comfort in Spanish. As the police car pulled away with Maria's ex inside, an officer approached to take their statements. The crowd slowly dispersed, though worried faces continued to peek through curtained windows up and down the street. The next few days passed in a fog of anxiety and unspoken fears. Daniel caught himself jumping at every unexpected sound, checking the locks twice before bed, scanning the street for unfamiliar cars. The bruise on his jaw had turned a deep purple, a constant reminder of how close they'd come to tragedy. Emily threw herself into caring for the baby with renewed determination, as if trying to make up for the fear with extra love. But Daniel noticed the shadows under her eyes, the way she startled when doors closed too loudly. One morning, he came downstairs to find Maria in the kitchen before dawn, her small suitcase packed by the door. She was writing a note at the kitchen table, tears dropping onto the paper. "Maria?" His voice made her jump. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, quickly wiping her eyes. "I never meant for any of this to happen. You and Emily, you've been so kind. But I can't stay. I won't be the reason your peaceful life is destroyed. Where will you go? I have a cousin in Arizona." She folded the note carefully. "The baby and I will be safe there. You've done more than enough for us already." Heavy footsteps on the stairs announced Emily's arrival. She took one look at the suitcase, and Maria's tear-stained face, and her expression hardened. "No," she said firmly. "You can't leave." "Emily," Maria started. "No," Emily's voice cracked. "You're family now. Both of you. We don't abandon family when things get hard." She turned to Daniel, her eyes pleading. "Dad, tell her she has to stay." Daniel looked between them, his daughter's desperate face, Maria's guilt-ridden one, the sleeping baby in his carrier. The weight of responsibility pressed down on his shoulders. Was he being selfish, wanting them to stay? Was he putting Emily at risk? The questions churned in his mind, leaving him paralyzed with indecision. "I need some air," he said finally, grabbing his jacket. "Nobody's leaving before I get back, promise me." Both Maria and Emily nodded, though neither looked happy about it. The night air was crisp and clean, carrying the first hints of spring. Daniel walked without direction, his thoughts as tangled as the bare branches above him. He'd promised Sarah, in those final days, that he would keep Emily safe. But what did safety mean? Physical protection, yes, but also teaching her to be brave, to stand up for what was right, to love without fear. The sidewalk led him to the very spot where he'd first found Maria in labor. It seemed like a lifetime ago now. He stopped, looking up at the vast expanse of stars overhead. "Lord," he whispered into the quiet night, his breath visible in the cold air, "show me the way." Dawn broke over Daniel's front yard, painting the sky in gentle brushstrokes of pink and gold that seemed to promise something beautiful ahead. He stood at his kitchen window, coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. Steam still rising from the dark liquid as he stared in complete disbelief at the scene unfolding outside his home, where yesterday there had been only scattered debris from the violent confrontation, broken glass, trampled flower beds, and the haunting memory of fear. Now there was a sea of familiar faces that made his heart skip a beat. Neighbors he hadn't spoken to in years stood shoulder to shoulder with regular churchgoers, their faces determined and kind. His co-workers, some still wearing their work uniforms from the early morning shift, mixed freely with local shop owners he recognized from downtown. Mrs. Patterson from 3 houses down stood next to young Tommy Miller, who delivered groceries on weekends. They held handmade signs with messages that brought tears to Daniel's eyes. "Love thy neighbor," written in bold red letters. "Maria, baby welcome here," decorated with little hearts, and "Carter family strong," that made his chest tight with emotion. The crowd wasn't just big, it was bigger than any gathering he'd seen in their quiet neighborhood. People kept arriving, parking along the street and walking up with purpose in their steps. "Dad?" Emily appeared beside him, her hair still messy from sleep, her eyes wide with wonder. "Is this real? Are all these people really here for us?" Before Daniel could find his voice to answer, Pastor Williams's distinct, warm tone carried through the morning air, amplified by a small megaphone that crackled slightly. "Brothers and sisters, we're here today because love is stronger than fear and community is stronger than hatred. We stand together." A gentle knock at the door made them both jump. Daniel's hands shook slightly as he turned the handle and opened it to find Sarah Chen, his next-door neighbor of 7 years, holding a large covered casserole dish that smelled like bacon and eggs. Her face glowed with the kind of smile that reaches all the way to someone's eyes. "I thought you all might need breakfast," she said, her voice warm with genuine care. "And there's more coming. A lot more." As if Sarah's words had summoned them, a steady stream of people began approaching the house, their arms full of covered dishes, bags of baby supplies, and thick envelopes. The morning air filled with quiet conversations and the rustle of paper bags. Someone had organized this. Daniel could see Pastor Williams moving through the crowd, directing people with gentle gestures and encouraging words. Maria emerged from the guest room, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, cradling her sleeping infant against her chest. She wore one of Emily's borrowed sweaters, and her face still showed the exhaustion of the previous night's terror. When she saw the crowd through the window, she froze completely, her eyes growing wide. What is happening?" she whispered, tears already welling in her brown eyes. "Why are all these people here?" Pastor Williams stepped through the front door, his presence filling the room with calm authority, accompanied by a sharp-dressed woman with graying hair who carried a professional leather briefcase. Her suit was navy blue and perfectly pressed, and she moved with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. "Maria, this is Catherine Martinez," Pastor Williams said, his voice gentle but filled with excitement. "She's an immigration attorney who specializes in asylum cases. She drove down from the city this morning when she heard about your situation." The lawyer stepped forward, extending her hand to Maria with a warm, reassuring smile. "Mrs. Alvarez, I'm honored to meet you. And this little one is absolutely beautiful. I've reviewed your situation through the night," Catherine said, her voice gentle but confident in a way that made Daniel's shoulders relax. "With the documented history of abuse, the police report from last night's incident, and the witness statements, we have a very strong case for asylum. The community support we're seeing here," she gestured toward the window where more people continued to gather. "That carries significant weight with immigration judges, too." Emily bounced on her toes, unable to contain her excitement, her hands clasped together. "See, Maria? I told you we wouldn't let you leave. I told you this town was full of good people." The morning unfolded like the most beautiful dream Daniel could have imagined. People filled his house with the warmth of friendship and the aroma of home-cooked food. They brought casseroles, fresh bread, baby formula, diapers, tiny clothes, and hand-knitted blankets. His living room transformed into a welcoming space filled with gentle laughter and quiet conversations in both English and Spanish. Mrs. Rodriguez from the bakery downtown arrived with boxes of fresh pastries and immediately set up a donation jar on Daniel's kitchen counter. "For legal fees," she explained with a knowing wink, "and whatever else our Maria needs." Within the first hour, The jar overflowed with bills and checks, and she had to find a larger container. Daniel's boss, Mr. Henderson, arrived around mid-morning, looking somewhat sheepish as he approached through the crowd. He pulled Daniel aside to the quiet corner of the front porch, away from the gentle bustle inside. "Listen, Carter," he said, clearing his throat and looking down at his work boots. "I was wrong about the publicity thing. Dead wrong. The way you've handled this whole situation? Well, we've actually had customers calling our office to say they're proud to do business with a company that employs people of character like you." Throughout the day, Maria moved through the crowd like someone discovering a new world. Daniel watched as strangers became friends, as people shared stories of their own struggles and offered help without asking for anything in return. Her baby passed from one set of gentle, experienced arms to another grandmother types who cooed and rocked while Maria rested, young mothers who shared practical advice, and teenagers who took selfies to send to friends with messages about how cute the baby was. Gradually, Maria's shoulders lost their defensive hunch. Her smile grew more natural. She began to laugh at jokes, to ask questions about the town, to accept hugs without flinching. Daniel had never seen such a beautiful transformation. Around mid-afternoon, as the sun reached its peak and cast everything in golden light, Pastor Williams gathered everyone in the front yard for a prayer circle. More than 50 people joined hands, forming a large ring that stretched across the lawn and onto the sidewalk. Standing there, surrounded by the incredible warmth of community support, Daniel felt something fundamental shift inside his chest. The weight of grief he'd carried since losing his wife didn't disappear, it would always be part of him. But it transformed into something different, something that felt more like wisdom than pain, more like strength than weakness. He understood now that his wife's love hadn't died with her. It lived on in moments like this, in the choice to help others, in the decision to open his heart despite the risk of being hurt again. Emily slipped her small hand into his and stood on her tiptoes to whisper in his ear, "Mom would be so proud of you, Dad." She would have loved Maria and the baby too. The crowd gradually thinned as evening approached, people heading home to their own families but leaving behind a house transformed. The refrigerator bulged with food, the nursery overflowed with supplies, and most importantly, the entire house hummed with hope. It felt alive again in a way it hadn't since his wife's passing. Catherine had commandeered the dining room table, spreading out official paperwork and explaining each step of the asylum process to Maria in clear, simple terms. Emily sat beside them, taking detailed notes on her phone, determined to help however she could. She'd appointed herself as Maria's unofficial assistant and took the job seriously. "The first hearing is usually within 6 weeks, Catherine explained, pointing to a calendar. "We'll need to gather more documentation, but with everything we have, I'm very optimistic." As twilight settled over the neighborhood like a soft blanket, Daniel found himself on the front porch, settling into his old wooden rocker that had belonged to his father. The chair creaked in a familiar, comforting way. The air was cool and sweet with the scent of spring blooms from Mrs. Chen's garden next door. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked playfully, and children's laughter echoed from a backyard. Maria joined him a few minutes later, moving carefully as she laid her sleeping baby in the portable bassinet someone had donated. The little one was wrapped in a soft yellow blanket that Mrs. Patterson had knitted that very afternoon. The baby's face was peaceful, tiny lips slightly parted, completely unaware of how many people had already fallen in love with her. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the last colors fade from the sky as streetlights began to flicker on one by one. Daniel glanced over his shoulder through the window and caught Emily watching them from the living room, her face glowing with a smile he hadn't seen since before her mother died. When she noticed him looking, she didn't turn away or pretend she wasn't watching. Instead, she pressed her hand against the glass and mouthed the words, "Thank you, Dad." Maria's soft voice drew his attention back to the porch. "I never thought." She paused, wiping a tear from her cheek with the back of her hand. "When I ran away from him, I thought I would always be running, always looking over my shoulder. I never dreamed I could find." She gestured at the house, the yard, the quiet street where neighbors still waved as they walked their dogs. All of this, a real home. Daniel looked at the sleeping infant, her tiny chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Then at Maria's profile in the gathering dusk. He thought about how one moment of choosing compassion over comfort had rippled outward like stones thrown into still water, touching not just their lives but an entire community. His house, so long a quiet shrine to what he'd lost, now hummed with new life and endless possibility. The porch light clicked on above them. Emily's doing, no doubt casting a warm, golden glow over them like a blessing. Maria reached down to adjust her baby's blanket, and Daniel noticed her hands were steady now, no longer trembling with fear. Her movements were sure and confident, like someone who finally believed she was safe. Somewhere in the distance, the church bell chimed 8 times, its deep, rich tones carrying across the peaceful evening air. A few stars appeared in the darkening sky, and Daniel remembered how his wife used to say that stars were God's way of reminding people that light always finds a way to shine through the darkness. In that perfect moment, watching Emily through the window with her hopeful smile reflecting the same warm light that softened Maria's tired face beside him, Daniel understood something profound. Sometimes the greatest acts of healing don't come from running away from pain, but from opening your heart wide enough to help someone else through theirs. And sometimes, in saving someone else, you discover that you've saved yourself too. The late afternoon sun streamed through the living room windows, casting a warm glow across Maria's face as she sat on the couch, clutching a thick envelope in trembling hands. Her baby girl dozed peacefully in the bassinet beside her, tiny fingers curled into perfect fists. "I can't believe it," Maria whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "They approved my asylum case." Daniel, who had been pacing nervously behind the couch, stopped and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. The touch sent a familiar warmth through both of them, a comfort that had grown deeper over these past weeks. "You deserve this," he said softly. "The whole town came together for you. For us." Emily bounded down the stairs, her footsteps thundering with teenage enthusiasm. "What did the lawyer say? Tell me everything." Maria held up the official document, her smile radiant through her tears. "I can stay. We can stay. And they're fast-tracking my work permit, too." Emily squealed and rushed to hug Maria, careful not to wake the baby. "This calls for a celebration. Dad, can we order pizza, please?" Daniel chuckled, the sound rich and full, so different from the quiet, reserved man he'd been just months ago. "Sure, sweetheart. Why don't you go ahead and call in our usual?" As Emily skipped off to place the order, Daniel settled onto the couch beside Maria. The baby stirred slightly, making those tiny squeaking sounds that never failed to melt his heart. "Remember that first night?" Maria asked, her voice soft with memory. "I was so scared, showing up at the hospital, not knowing if I could trust anyone. And now look at us," Daniel replied, gesturing to their living room, now decorated with both Emily's school photos and new pictures of the baby. "Sometimes I think Sarah had a hand in all this." Maria turned to him, understanding in her eyes. They'd spoken of Sarah, Daniel's late wife, many times over these weeks. "Tell me about her again?" Daniel's eyes grew distant, but not with the raw pain that used to accompany memories of Sarah. Now there was a gentle fondness. "She always said that love multiplies, it doesn't divide, that there's always room in your heart for more, if you're brave enough to open it." "She sounds very wise," Maria said, reaching over to take his hand. "She would have loved you," Daniel said quietly. "The way you've brought life back into this house. The way Emily lights up around you and the baby. For so long, I thought protecting her meant keeping our world small and safe. But you showed us that sometimes the biggest risk brings the greatest blessing." Maria squeezed his hand. "You took a chance on me when everyone else might have looked away. You gave me more than shelter, you gave me hope." The baby chose that moment to wake, her tiny face scrunching up before breaking into a toothless smile at the sight of them. Daniel reached down to stroke her cheek, marveling at how natural it felt now. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," he admitted. "After Sarah died, I locked up my heart so tight. But watching you with Emily, seeing how she's bloomed since you came. Maria, you didn't just need us. We needed you too." Maria's eyes shimmered with tears. "When I first saw you that day on the sidewalk, I was terrified. But something in your eyes. I knew I could trust you. God works in mysterious ways, doesn't he?" "That he does," Daniel agreed, drawing her closer. Their relationship had evolved so naturally. Neither of them had noticed exactly when friendship had deepened into something more. It felt right, like pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. Emily returned, phone in hand. Pizza's ordered, and guess what? Channel 5 is doing a follow-up story about us tonight. They're replaying Dad's superhero moment. Right on cue, the TV news anchor's voice filled the room. 6 months ago, this viral video captured more than just a roadside delivery. It captured the moment that changed everything for a small town in need of hope. The familiar footage played, Daniel kneeling on the sidewalk, his face focused and determined as he helped bring Maria's daughter into the world. Emily filming with shaky hands, her voice full of awe. But this time, the story continued. Images flashed across the screen. The community rally, neighbors holding signs of support, the local church organizing donations, Daniel's boss speaking at a press conference about standing behind his employees. What began as one man's act of kindness, the reporter continued, sparked a movement of compassion that transformed an entire community. Today, Maria Alvarez and her daughter are legal residents, surrounded by a town that fought to give them a home. The final shot showed their backyard from just last weekend. Daniel pushing Emily on the old swing set while Maria sat in the grass, the baby propped up against her legs. All of them laughing, the late summer light making everything glow. "You know what?" Emily said, flopping down between Daniel and Maria on the couch. "This is way better than any fairy tale. This is real." Maria lifted the baby onto her lap, and the infant immediately reached for Emily's finger. Real, and more beautiful than I ever dared to dream. Daniel wrapped an arm around both of them, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. Where once there had been emptiness, now there was abundance. Where there had been silence, now there was laughter. Where there had been grief, now there was love. Multiplied. Just as Sarah had always said it would be. The news segment ended, but their story, their family's story, was really just beginning. What started as one act of kindness turned into a miracle the world could not stop talking about. A single dad, a fragile mother, a newborn fighting to breathe, and a community that would never be the same again. But when the past comes roaring back and danger pounds at their front door, one question hangs heavy in the air. Will love be enough to save them this time? Thank you so much for watching this story with me today. I don't take your presence here for granted. The fact that you've shared these few minutes means more than you know. I'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from? And what part of this story touched you the deepest? If you believe the world needs more stories about compassion, second chances, and hope that conquers fear, please hit subscribe and join this community. Your support helps keep these stories alive.